Welcome to another Midnight Voyage, a space where science becomes story and story becomes serenity. As the world grows quiet and the stars begin to hum above us, you found your way to a place between waking and sleep. A place where curiosity can drift freely and time moves like a slow tide. Each journey we take here will guide you through the deep past, across the cosmos, and into the inner workings of reality itself. Sometimes we'll wander through the formation of planets. Other times we'll glide along the fabric of space-time or walk quietly through the footsteps of history. But no matter the destination, the path will always be gentle, mindful, and crafted to help you relax, reflect, and, if you wish, sleep. Before we begin tonight's journey, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it where you are right now? Is it midnight, 3 a.m., or those quiet moments before dawn when the birds start to sing? Feel free to share in the comments and connect with fellow Voyagers. We'd love to know what part of this voyage intrigues you most. That is, if you are still awake to experience it. Remember, this isn't just a broadcast, it's a community of quiet travellers. So take a deep breath, settle into your pillow or chair, let your eyelids soften, and now, let yourself drift. Together, we begin tonight's midnight voyage, in the quiet void of space. Beneath the endless dance of distant stars there exists a planet, a small blue orb suspended in the vastness of the cosmos. The Earth, our Earth, pulses with life in a way that no other place in the universe can claim. It is as though the Earth itself breathes in and out, with each cycle of life moving in harmony, guided by unseen forces, each one playing its part in the grand, eternal rhythm of existence. At first glance, Earth may seem like nothing more than a lifeless rock, a silent witness to the passage of time. But if we look deeper, much deeper, beneath the surface, within the air we breathe, in the soil beneath our feet, and in the vast seas that stretch across its surface, there is a story unfolding, a story of life, of change, and of endless possibility. Life, in all its many forms, is the heartbeat of this planet, and that heartbeat has been steady, unyielding, and beautiful in its resilience for billions of years. Imagine for a moment the pulse of life, so steady, so constant, that it feels as though the planet itself is alive, as if each living thing within it is a note in the grand symphony of time. This rhythm, so quiet, yet so profound, began in the most unassuming of places, deep within the oceans of an early Earth. These first whispers of life were not marked by grand gestures or dramatic events. They were slow, subtle, and patient, like the quiet beat of a heart. Life began, as all things do, in the stillness of the deep blue, where the first single cells danced to the unseen pulse of the planet. As time passed, the Earth's pulse grew stronger, and with it life began to take shape. Each new era, each new epoch brought with it new possibilities, new expressions of life adapted to the changing world around them. From the tiniest, most delicate cells that first stirred in the primordial waters, to the first creatures to crawl upon the land, to the great herds of mammoths that once roamed the frozen landscapes of Earth. Every moment, every era carries with it the echoes of life's eternal song. But what is this pulse? What is it that drives life forward, from the smallest microbe to the most complex creatures? It is a force beyond our comprehension, yet it is so close to us that we can feel it in our very bones. This pulse is the delicate balance of energy and matter, of birth and decay, of silence and sound. It is the force that has shaped Earth's surface over millions of years. Through the cooling of molten rock, the rise of mountains, and the slow, persistent shaping of continents. The pulse of life, however, is not simply about survival. It is about transformation. Each chapter in Earth's story brings with it something new, a new form of life, a new way of being, uniquely adapted to the time and place in which it lives. The very fabric of life has evolved over billions of years, moulded by the forces of nature and time, weaving a tapestry of existence that stretches back to the beginnings of our planet and continues to unfold today. In the quiet hum of nature, we can hear the stories of life's evolution, the soft rustling of leaves in ancient forests, the gentle lapping of the ocean against the shore, the silent, relentless movement of glaciers carving valleys into the land. All of these are expressions of life's pulse, continuing to beat softly and steadily through every age of Earth's history. Though the land and seas may change and the creatures may come and go, the pulse of life remains constant, flowing like a river through time, ever onward, ever patient, ever sure. This journey we're about to take will show you how that pulse has guided life, shaped its course, and continues to push us forward, gently leading us through the ages. It is a journey not just through time, but through the very essence of what it means to be alive. Each age, each epoch, carries with it a memory of life, of Earth itself, and the quiet forces that continue to shape us all. Now let us begin our journey, beginning at the dawn of time, when life first took root in the deepest, most silent waters of ancient Earth. The pulse is still strong, and it will carry us through the eons, one gentle beat at a time. Before the mountains rose from the depths of the Earth, before the continents slowly drifted across the face of the planet, there existed a time when Earth was still in its infancy. The planet was a quiet, still world, without the familiar sounds we know today. No winds whispered through the ancient forests, no creatures roamed the lands, and no rivers rushed towards the oceans. In this time, only the most delicate forces shaped the world. This was the Precambrian, an age that spanned more than 4 billion years. It was an era that stretched across the very beginning of Earth's history, from the cooling of the molten surface to the first delicate stirrings of life. The land was young, the atmosphere thick with gases, yet, beneath the swirling clouds, beneath the churning, restless seas, there was a deeper silence, the profound quiet of a planet still forming. The Earth was a place of intense change. Volcanoes rumbled and erupted, their fiery breath reaching towards the heavens. The surface of the planet was constantly reshaped by violent tectonic forces. There were no lush forests, no towering mountains, only the slow, rhythmic dance of molten rock and the violent caress of storms. Yet beneath these restless movements, deep within the oceans, life began to emerge. Imagine for a moment the ocean as it was then, vast and endless, a deep, dark canvas that stretched far beyond what the eye could see. The water was warm, filled with the minerals that would one day cradle all life. The early seas were a place of quiet transformation, where the pulse of life would first emerge, not in grand gestures or dramatic events, but in the subtle, hidden spaces between molecules, between atoms. Here, in the silence of the deep, the first whispers of life began to stir. Life, in its earliest form, was impossibly small. Single-celled organisms, tiny, fragile specks, drifted in the waters, unaware of the vast, changing world above them. These cells, so simple yet so profound, began their slow dance in the primordial ocean, caught in the rhythmic currents of the Earth's pulse. They were invisible to the naked eye, but their presence was already a quiet revolution, the beginning of something extraordinary. Each tiny cell, floating in the deep, held the potential of all that was to come. Every plant, every animal, every creature that would one day walk, swim, or soar across Earth's surface. For billions of years, life in the Precambrian was soft and delicate. There were no predators, no competition. The oceans were a tranquil world, and life existed in an unhurried rhythm, moving in harmony with the natural cycles of the Earth. The simple cells, prokaryotes without a nucleus, floated, absorbed nutrients, and reproduced, their delicate dance unnoticed by the world above. In this vast, unbroken silence, the first stirrings of life were unfolding. Every cell, though small and simple, was full of life's potential. The oceans were the birthplace of life, and the currents that swept through them carried the seeds of future generations. The Earth, still in its youth, had not yet felt the weight of complex life, yet within the quiet waters, The building blocks of everything that would come were already taking shape. Imagine the slow, steady passage of time during these ancient days. The Earth turned day after day, as it had for countless eons before, and life moved quietly in the deep blue, each organism finding its place in the primordial soup. These early forms of life were so small, so simple, that they left no trace, no fossil to mark their existence. And yet, their lives were the first notes in the grand symphony of life's evolution. In these early moments, there was no rush, no hurry. Time stretched endlessly forward, unbroken and peaceful. Life, it seemed, existed in a state of perfect stillness. But though nothing moved visibly, change was quietly taking place beneath the surface. Over time, the simplest cells began to divide, to adapt, to experiment with new forms of existence. Some began to form colonies, working together in delicate partnerships, where the sum was greater than the individual parts. Others evolved to capture the sun's energy, turning sunlight into nourishment in a process known as photosynthesis. This quiet revolution was happening in the deep, unseen waters, where the first signs of life's complexity began to take shape. Life at its most basic was simple, yet it was beginning to find new ways of being, new ways of thriving in an ever-changing world. The Earth, though still young and full of mystery, was already setting the stage for the flourishing of life to come. The very fabric of life, so delicate, so fragile, was already laying its foundation. With each gentle shift in the waters, each division of a cell, life became more intricate, more diverse. The oceans, once still and silent, began to hum with the gentle energy of evolution. Yet for millions of years, these early life forms remained hidden, invisible to the eyes of the world, but they were there, waiting for the moment when their simplicity would give way to something greater. Life in the Precambrian was not in a rush to change. It was content to exist, to grow, and to adapt in its own time. The ocean's surface may have been untouched by the creatures that would one day walk upon it, but beneath the waves, life was quietly laying the groundwork for what was to come. In the stillness of the deep, in the absence of complexity, life was quietly preparing to unfold. It was like the first soft notes of a symphony, barely audible but full of promise. The earth had not yet seen its great moments of transformation, but the seed of every living thing was planted here, in the gentle waters of the ancient seas. In this moment we begin our journey, on the shores of time, in the first stirring of life on earth. The Precambrian was the beginning of it all, a time of profound simplicity and unspoken beauty. It was in these early, fragile moments that life began to pulse with potential, quietly awaiting its evolution. After the long, patient years of the Precambrian, when life existed in the quiet depths of the oceans, in its simplest forms, something extraordinary began to unfold. It was as if the earth, having nurtured life in the shadows for eons, was now ready to reveal the grandeur of its creation. This moment, the Cambrian explosion, marked the awakening of life as we know it. It was the earth's grand unveiling, where the once silent and unassuming world suddenly burst forth with an incredible variety of creatures, each one more intricate and sophisticated than the last. Picture, if you will, a vast primordial sea. The oceans, which had once been still and simple, began to shift with new energy. The waters grew vibrant with life, teeming with forms that had never been seen before. It was a time of wonder, as the deep blue sea became a living canvas, each stroke of life's brush more vivid, more diverse than anything the earth had yet known. For millions of years, life had evolved at a gentle pace, moving through subtle transformations. But in the Cambrian, there was a sudden and dramatic acceleration. It was as if life itself had discovered the full extent of its potential, and in an explosion of creativity, the oceans became a riot of shapes, sizes, and colours. New creatures appeared seemingly overnight, each one adding a new note to the symphony of existence. For the first time, life became a rich tapestry, full of intricate patterns and harmonious complexity. The Cambrian period is often referred to as the Age of Exploration, because during this time, life explored every possibility of form and function. Hard shells, segmented bodies, complex eyes. All of these features emerged with astonishing speed. Suddenly the oceans were full of creatures with exoskeletons, creatures with fins, creatures with antennae, and creatures with wings. The diversity of life exploded in a way that the world had never seen. Imagine the oceans of this time, a vast shifting world where the first trilobites scuttled along the seafloor, their many-lensed eyes scanning the waters for signs of movement. Nearby, the first worms, with their segmented bodies, writhed in the mud, leaving a trail of life in their wake. The waters were alive with the hum of life, from the tiniest, almost invisible plankton to the first predators, creatures with sharp spines and teeth, hungry for the wealth of life that was now abundant in the oceans. This explosion of life was not just a flurry of activity, it was the beginning of modern ecosystems. Each new creature played its part, filling a role in the vast interconnected web of life that began to take shape in the waters. Some creatures burrowed into the soft sea floor, while others floated serenely in the water's depths. Some grew in size, becoming the first large animals, while others remained small, their delicate bodies drifting in the current. Life, once so simple and fragile, was now complex and dynamic. The oceans became a living stage for the drama of existence, where each creature, from the tiniest filter-feeding organism to the first carnivorous predator, had its part to play. And as these creatures evolved, so too did the environment that surrounded them. The chemistry of the oceans began to shift as more life forms took root in its depths. Oxygen levels began to rise, the seas became richer in nutrients, and the earth itself began to hum with the promise of more. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Cambrian explosion was the development of new strategies for survival. Creatures began to evolve new ways to capture food, new ways to move, new ways to protect themselves from the dangers of the world. Some developed hard shells, offering protection from predators. Others grew powerful legs, allowing them to crawl or swim in ways never before imagined. And then there were those who developed eyes that could see, eyes that could explore the world in ways that were previously impossible. The Cambrian period was the birth of complexity, the dawn of life's innovation. But with this new wave of life came a delicate balance. For the first time, predators began to emerge, creatures that hunted and fed on others. The gentle rhythm of life that had characterized the Precambrian was now accompanied by a new, dynamic tension. The oceans, once a peaceful place of slow evolution, were now a battleground, where survival was a constant struggle. But this struggle was not chaotic. It was the dance of life, where each movement, each adaptation, was a part of the larger rhythm of existence. The Cambrian explosion was not an isolated event. It was the beginning of a journey that would take life from the quiet waters of the ocean to the land, into the skies and beyond. It set the stage for everything that came after: the rise of vertebrates, the exploration of new habitats, the eventual colonization of land, and the diversity of creatures that would come to define the Earth. The Cambrian period was the foundation, the starting point, the beginning of the world as we know it. In the vastness of time, the Cambrian explosion may have been a brief moment, a flash of brilliance in the history of Earth, but in that moment, life transformed. The deep, silent oceans were filled with energy, colour, and diversity. Life, once simple and quiet, had awakened, and the pulse of Earth's evolution quickened. The Earth itself seemed to breathe faster, as if recognising the immense potential of the life it had nurtured in the depths. As the oceans roared with the explosion of life, Earth's pulse quickened, and the planet itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. This was not just the awakening of life, it was the awakening of the Earth itself. The Cambrian explosion marked the beginning of life's vibrant, complex journey. A journey that continues today, with every wave of the ocean and every whisper of wind carrying the echoes of this ancient moment. As life's complexity unfolded in the Cambrian period, it was not just the development of physical traits that made this time so remarkable. The fundamental nature of how life existed began to change. For the first time, life became a true, interconnected web. Every organism was not only dependent on the resources provided by the Earth, but was also connected to the creatures around it. From the smallest plankton drifting in the water to the largest predator prowling the ocean floor, life was beginning to show signs of symbiosis, where creatures interacted in ways that shaped their survival. The delicate balance between predator and prey was starting to take shape, and the environment began to hum with the complexity of life's interactions. At the same time, the Cambrian explosion saw a dramatic increase in the diversity of animal body plans. Life evolved to fill every niche. Some organisms developed exoskeletons for protection, while others grew fins, and still others mastered the art of locomotion, whether by swimming or crawling. The appearance of the first complex eyes marked a turning point. These simple yet revolutionary structures allowed creatures to see and react to their environment in ways that had never been possible before. It was as though life, once shrouded in a fog of simplicity, had suddenly gained the ability to perceive its world in all its vivid detail. This new vision brought with it the dawn of predator-prey dynamics, where survival depended on speed, cunning, and the ability to avoid becoming a meal for another. The evolution of these creatures was a slow, yet profound, awakening. Creatures that once drifted aimlessly in the ocean began to engage with their surroundings in more intentional ways. The development of sensory organs and more complex nervous systems allowed them to navigate their environments with precision. Some organisms developed the ability to burrow, carving out spaces beneath the ocean floor where they could hide from the new predators. Others evolved the ability to swim more efficiently, their bodies streamlined for movement through the water. In this way, life was not only diversifying in form, but also finding new ways to thrive in a rapidly changing world. The oceans, once a quiet place of simple life, had become a dynamic, living ecosystem, full of movement, interaction, and growth. But not all creatures of the Cambrian were destined to survive. The sudden rise of predators brought a new, more violent aspect to life. For the first time, the ocean became a battleground where survival was not guaranteed. The newly evolved predators with sharp teeth and powerful limbs began to hunt the more defenseless creatures. The creation of hard shells and armored bodies in many species was a direct response to this new danger. Life had begun to evolve not only in response to the environment around it, but also to the creatures living alongside it. It was a time of both creation and destruction, of new opportunities, but also new challenges. The ecosystems of the Cambrian period were no longer simple. They were full of competition and struggle, driving the next phase of life's evolution. Even though life was becoming more complex, the Cambrian period was still a time of incredible experimentation. Evolution was moving quickly, and the variety of forms that emerged during this time would lay the foundation for the animals that followed. Some creatures, like the trilobites, would evolve into the ancestors of modern arthropods. Others, like the early chordates, were the forerunners of vertebrates, creatures with backbones that would eventually come to dominate the land. This explosion of life forms did not just mark a shift in the types of creatures on Earth, but signaled the dawn of animal life as we know it today. The Cambrian period was, in many ways, the beginning of the evolutionary journey that would lead to the rich biodiversity of the modern world. As the Cambrian period continued, the Earth itself began to change. The oxygen levels in the atmosphere increased, a direct result of the explosion of photosynthetic organisms in the oceans. This shift in atmospheric chemistry set the stage for the rise of more complex life forms. The Earth was breathing, its atmosphere expanding, preparing for the next chapters of life's journey. The rise of oxygen allowed for the development of larger, more energy-intensive creatures. It was a slow process, but it marked the beginning of a new era in life's history. The Cambrian explosion had opened the door to a world of possibilities, and life was ready to seize them. Beneath a sky far older than anything we can imagine, the Earth's oceans began to hum with life in the Devonian period. This was no longer a time of simple organisms drifting aimlessly through primordial waters. Life had started to evolve in ways so complex, it was as if the oceans themselves had become the living heartbeat of the planet. The seas, once a quiet, passive stage, had come alive, filled with creatures of breathtaking diversity. Fish, the first vertebrates, had emerged from the depths, and with them came a revolution in life on Earth. The oceans of the Devonian were a bustling world, each layer of water teeming with life, from the shallow reefs to the deep, mysterious trenches. Fish were the architects of this new world, their evolution changing the very fabric of life beneath the waves. At the heart of this transformation was the fish's backbone, the vertebral column, which would allow life to take its next evolutionary leap. With a structure that could support greater movement, strength, and complexity, these early vertebrates gained an unparalleled advantage. No longer were they bound by the simple, passive movements of invertebrates. The world beneath the waves had become a place of dynamic activity, where survival depended on movement, strategy, and adaptation. In these waters, the first true predators began to emerge, creatures like the placoderms, with their armoured plates and sharp jaws, glided through the seas. Their bodies, once simple and unprotected, were now encased in bony shields that could withstand the brutal forces of the ocean's new competition. The placoderms, with their complex sensory organs and fierce jaws, had become the ocean's first hunters. They were no longer simply grazing along the seafloor, they were actively pursuing prey, and in doing so, they set the stage for the rise of predator and prey dynamics that would come to define life on Earth for millions of years. Yet the transformation of life wasn't limited to the predators alone. The prey too had begun to evolve in response. Some fish, in a race to survive, developed their own innovations. Protective armour, much like the placoderms, began to appear on smaller fish. Some grew fins capable of swift, graceful movements, while others adapted to the ocean's more hazardous environments, evolving to hide from predators or to live in more extreme habitats. Fish began to occupy every niche in the ocean, from the warm, sunlit shallows to the deep, dark waters where light could not penetrate. It was a time of innovation, a time when every creature seemed to be reaching for something more, pushing the boundaries of their environments, finding new ways to survive. As these fish began to thrive in the deepening waters, the evolution of jaws marked one of the most profound changes in Earth's history. The development of jaws allowed these fish to hunt, to bite, to capture prey in ways that no creature before them had been able to. Once, the ocean's creatures had been limited to scavenging or filtering the water for food. But with jaws came a new world of opportunities, a world where hunting, chasing, and fighting for survival were not just necessary, they were part of the rhythm of life. This was no longer a time of passive existence, but an era of active engagement, where every creature had to adapt or perish. With the rise of the first vertebrates, the oceans began to hum with a new energy. No longer just the backdrop to life, the oceans were now a stage for it. The water shimmered with movement, the creatures within it, from the smallest plankton to the largest fish, each playing their part in the intricate dance of life. Fish were not simply surviving, they were thriving, evolving, and defining the future of life on Earth. While the oceans teemed with the pulse of life, the land, once barren and empty, was waiting. It was not a world where life could survive easily, but it was a world full of promise. The first vertebrates, those fish that had conquered the seas, were beginning to venture out of their watery home. The transition from ocean to land would not be sudden, nor would it be easy. The early amphibians, creatures caught between two worlds, were the first to test the limits of life on land. They had learned to breathe air, and their journey from water to land was one of exploration, trial, and gradual transformation. Imagine the first amphibians, a fish-like creature with the potential to live both in water and on land. Their bodies, still reminiscent of their aquatic ancestors, were beginning to evolve in ways that would allow them to adapt to the dry, harsh world beyond the shores. Their fins began to develop into more robust limbs, capable of supporting their bodies on the ground. These early amphibians were not yet fully terrestrial. They were still tied to the water, needing to return to it to lay their eggs, but they were beginning to explore the possibilities of the land. The transition was slow and filled with challenges, but each step they took marked a leap forward for life on Earth. On the shores of the Devonian seas, these first amphibians began to crawl, their limbs pushing against the soft mud, testing the solidity of the land beneath them. They were slow, tentative movements at first, unsure of their new environment. Life on land was not easy. It was harsh, unforgiving and dry. These early amphibians had to adapt to the land's constant threat of desiccation, learning to protect their bodies from the harsh sunlight and the dry, arid air. Their skin, which had once been adapted for life in the water, began to evolve to become more resistant to drying out. They were becoming, slowly, creatures of both land and water, finding new ways to survive, to adapt and to thrive. In the waters, life continued to evolve, and fish grew ever more diverse. But it was the rise of plants on land that truly began to transform the world. The first plants, simple and small, took root along the shores, releasing oxygen into the atmosphere, which in turn began to change the composition of the air. This rise in oxygen would be crucial for the evolution of life on land, providing the energy needed for more complex organisms. Plants, once an insignificant presence on Earth, were now changing the very nature of the planet. They created an environment where life could breathe more easily, setting the stage for the first land-based vertebrates to truly thrive. The amphibians of the Devonian were the pioneers of land life. They were creatures caught between two worlds, unable to fully abandon the water, yet slowly adapting to the land. Their lungs, once used only to take in small breaths of air, began to evolve to sustain them for longer periods out of the water. Their bodies, still fish-like in many respects, became more and more suited to the terrestrial world. The first amphibians had taken their first steps on land, but their journey was far from over. Over time, their descendants would become the reptiles, birds and mammals that would dominate the earth. As the amphibians ventured further onto the land, the pulse of life quickened. The earth was no longer a simple watery world. It was becoming a complex, vibrant place where life could thrive on both land and sea. The rise of the first vertebrates, fish, amphibians, marked the beginning of a new era, a time when life was no longer bound to the oceans, but was free to explore the vast expanses of the land. Life on Earth was in motion, changing, evolving, always moving forward. The Earth had entered a new age, and the first vertebrates, in their slow and steady journey from sea to land, were just the beginning of a story that would span millions of years. Their journey had begun, and with it the future of life on Earth had been set in motion. The amphibians, with their first tentative steps, had opened the door to the world of land-dwelling vertebrates, setting the stage for the explosion of life that would follow. As the Earth shifted into the Carboniferous period, something truly remarkable began to unfold. What was once a barren land, void of trees or any significant plant life, was now becoming an incredibly lush and vibrant world. Imagine a world where towering trees reached hundreds of feet into the sky, their dense canopies casting shadows across the landscape. The ground, once barren, was covered in dense vegetation, ferns, club mosses, and giant horsetails, forming vast swamps and dense forests. This was the age of the first true forests, where life flourished in a way that had never been seen before. The pulse of life had grown louder, more diverse and more complex, At the heart of this transformation were the plants. With the rise of vascular plants, which had the ability to transport water and nutrients throughout their tall woody stems, came the possibility of towering forests. These plants, once small ground-hugging ferns, had evolved into towering trees that could reach extraordinary heights. Some of the earliest trees, like Archaeopteris, had woody trunks and leaves resembling modern-day ferns. These trees, with their ability to grow to enormous heights, began to change the very nature of the Earth's surface. The atmosphere, which had once been thick with carbon dioxide, began to shift as plants began to photosynthesize in massive quantities. The Earth was breathing again, this time with the power of oxygen. As plants grew in size, so too did their ability to produce oxygen, enriching the atmosphere and paving the way for more complex forms of life. The Carboniferous period is named for the vast deposits of coal formed from the remains of these ancient forests, which were buried over millions of years, transforming into the coal beds that power much of the world today. But at the time, the forested land was alive with movement. Creatures of all sizes began to emerge, filling the air and the ground with the promise of life's new terrestrial future. Underneath these towering trees, an entirely new ecosystem began to form. The ground was teeming with a wealth of life. Large ferns and club mosses formed dense undergrowth, while primitive amphibians, still closely tied to the water, began to evolve in new ways. These early amphibians, though not yet fully terrestrial, had adapted to living on land for longer periods, evolving thicker, more protective skin to guard against desiccation. Their bodies, once built for aquatic life, were now beginning to evolve to handle the dry conditions of the land. They were the first to explore the vast wet forests, where the humid air and rich plant life provided the perfect environment for their growth. In the swampy regions, giant amphibians began to thrive. These creatures were unlike any amphibians we know today. Some grew to massive sizes, reaching lengths of over 20 feet. These amphibians, such as Eriops, had thick muscular bodies and were the apex predators of their environments. They were not just survivors, they were giants of their time, roaming the wet, dense forests, preying upon smaller amphibians, early reptiles, and aquatic life. With their powerful limbs and heavily built bodies, they could navigate both land and water with ease. The rise of these giant amphibians marked a pivotal moment in the evolution of life on Earth, demonstrating how life was adapting to the increasingly complex ecosystems forming on land. But the world of the Carboniferous wasn't just dominated by amphibians. The world was alive with new forms of life. Giant insects flourished in this humid, oxygen-rich environment. Dragonflies with wingspans of up to 30 inches darted through the air, their wings shimmering in the dim light of the dense forest. Giant millipedes and cockroaches, some growing to lengths of several feet, scuttled along the forest floor. These insects were not just large, they were an essential part of the ecosystem, breaking down organic matter and contributing to the complex interactions of life in the Carboniferous period. As these giant creatures roamed beneath the towering trees, a new and dynamic ecosystem began to take shape. The forests became the lungs of the planet, producing oxygen and creating habitats for a wealth of new life. The soil was rich, moist, and alive with microbes, fungi, and invertebrates that worked in concert to recycle nutrients and sustain the towering trees above. The world was changing at an unprecedented pace. With each passing generation, life on land was growing more intricate and more interconnected. This was the world of the Carboniferous period, a time of extraordinary change. The land was no longer barren, it was a living, breathing ecosystem, full of life, both big and small. The towering trees and lush vegetation were the backbone of this new world, providing shelter, food and oxygen for the many creatures that called this place home. The pulse of life was strong, and the Earth was beginning to take its first steps toward the world we know today. While the forests of the Carboniferous period thrived and the land became increasingly lush with life. Something even more profound was unfolding beneath the surface. The first true reptiles were beginning to emerge. These creatures, the descendants of the amphibians, would change the future of life on Earth. No longer bound to the water for reproduction, these early reptiles had evolved amniotic eggs, allowing them to lay their eggs on land. This was the crucial evolutionary step that allowed life to truly take hold on land, independent of water. The rise of reptiles marked the dawn of a new era. Unlike amphibians, which needed water to reproduce, reptiles were free to colonize new environments, dry, arid lands that were previously inhospitable. With the evolution of the amniotic egg, which provided a safe, self-contained environment for developing embryos, reptiles could now lay their eggs on dry land, allowing them to thrive far away from the water's edge. This ability to reproduce on land was a game changer, opening up vast new habitats for these creatures to explore. As reptiles began to thrive on land, they evolved into a variety of forms. Some grew large and powerful, with armoured bodies that could withstand the harsh conditions of the dry, sun-scorched world. Others evolved to be small and nimble, their sleek bodies adapted to a life of hunting and scavenging. The Earth was becoming a world of diversity and opportunity, where life was no longer limited to the moist, humid forests, but could spread across vast, dry landscapes. These reptiles were the forerunners of the dinosaurs, birds, and modern reptiles, and their rise marked the beginning of the reign of land-dwelling creatures. As the first reptiles ventured further onto the land, the environment around them began to change. The forests of the Carboniferous, once dominated by dense, swampy vegetation, began to give way to new types of plants. Conifers and seed plants began to rise in abundance, their deep roots stabilizing the soil and preventing erosion. The rise of these plants, in turn, supported the growth of more complex ecosystems. Reptiles, insects, and the first true mammals began to evolve in response to the changing world around them. The atmosphere itself was undergoing a transformation. With the explosion of plant life during the Carboniferous period, the Earth's oxygen levels reached new heights, creating a richer, more breathable environment for both land-dwelling creatures and those still living in the oceans. The increased oxygen levels also contributed to the gigantism seen in many creatures of the time, from the towering trees to the massive insects that filled the air. The world was a place of vast potential, full of both challenges and opportunities. The legacy of the Carboniferous period can still be seen today. The coal beds formed from the remains of the lush, ancient forests continue to provide fuel for the modern world. The rise of reptiles marked the beginning of an age where land-based life would dominate, setting the stage for the dinosaurs that would rule the Earth millions of years later. The pulse of life had never been stronger, and the Earth, with its vibrant forests and towering giants, seemed poised to take its next great leap forward. When we step into the Mesozoic era, we enter a world where the pulse of life has grown louder, more diverse, and more dramatic than ever before. The Triassic period, the first chapter of this new era, marks a time when life on Earth was shifting. After the Permian-Triassic extinction event, which had wiped out nearly 90% of all life, the Earth was a world of opportunity for the survivors. Amidst the devastation, the first dinosaurs began to emerge, marking the beginning of the age of reptiles. This was an era of giants, an age that would forever change the course of evolution. The Triassic period was a time of rebirth. Life slowly began to recover in the aftermath of the Great Extinction. The first mammals, small and simple, began to evolve alongside the first true dinosaurs. These early dinosaurs were still small, nothing like the colossal creatures that would later dominate the Earth. But they were adaptable and versatile, laying the groundwork for what was to come. The world had shifted from an age ruled by amphibians to one that was increasingly dominated by reptiles. These early dinosaurs were agile, fast-moving creatures that could take advantage of the abundant food and newly formed ecosystems. They were not yet the towering giants that would later roam the Earth, but they were quick, smart, and well suited to the rapidly changing environments. In the forests of the Triassic, a new world was taking shape. The first conifers and cycads began to spread, creating the foundational ecosystems for the reptiles to thrive. The planet was breathing again, and this time, the air was filled with the promise of new, powerful creatures. While the first dinosaurs began to carve their niche, the marine reptiles were also evolving in the seas. Creatures like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs dominated the oceans, filling ecological roles similar to those of modern-day dolphins and whales. These marine reptiles were sleek, built for speed and agility in the water, and their evolution marked a time when life on Earth was beginning to adapt to every environment: land, sea, and sky. The pulse of life was quickening, and the early Mesozoic era was alive with the hum of change. The Triassic period also saw the first significant evolutionary advancements in the sky. The earliest flying reptiles, known as pterosaurs, took to the air, their wingspans stretching across the sky. These early flyers were not birds, but their ability to soar above the Earth added another layer of complexity to the Mesozoic world. The skies were no longer empty. They were filled with new forms of life that would evolve into the great birds and flying creatures of the future. It was in the Triassic that life began to conquer the air in earnest. As the dinosaurs and other reptiles evolved, the Earth itself was changing. The land masses of the planet were still in motion, and the continents began to drift apart. Pangaea, the supercontinent that had dominated the Earth for millions of years, began to break apart, creating new coastlines, mountain ranges, and ocean basins. The climate shifted, too, becoming warmer and more humid in many places, setting the stage for the flourishing of life in the Jurassic period. The Earth was preparing for a new age, an age dominated by reptiles and, more specifically, dinosaurs. The Triassic period set the stage for everything that followed. The first true dinosaurs had begun to emerge, and with them came the first signs of an era that would define the Earth for millions of years. It was the dawn of the age of reptiles, a time when life would evolve in ways that had never been seen before. As the Earth continued to change, the pulse of life grew stronger, preparing for the next great leap forward. The Jurassic period, the second chapter of the Mesozoic era, is the time when dinosaurs truly took over the Earth. After the Triassic, when the first dinosaurs had begun to make their mark, the Jurassic saw them evolve into the massive, diverse creatures we are familiar with today. The age of dinosaurs had arrived in full force, and the Earth was their playground. The world was lush, green, and full of life, perfect for the giant creatures that now dominated the land. The Jurassic period is often described as the golden age of dinosaurs. It was a time of unparalleled diversity and growth, when new species of dinosaurs, both herbivorous and carnivorous, grew to enormous sizes. The first sauropods, the long-necked giants like Brachiosaurus and Apatosaurus, began to roam the Earth. These massive creatures, with their towering necks, could reach the highest treetops, feeding on the lush vegetation that covered the Earth's surface. Their immense size made them the undisputed giants of the land, and their evolution marked a time when plant-eating dinosaurs had developed an evolutionary advantage. At the same time, the carnivorous dinosaurs were evolving as well. The theropods, including Allosaurus and the early Tyrannosaurus rex, were growing larger and more powerful, becoming the apex predators of their ecosystems. These fearsome creatures had sharp claws, strong jaws, and teeth designed to tear through flesh. They hunted in packs, utilizing strategy and speed to bring down prey. The ecosystems of the Jurassic were complex, with a delicate balance between the plant-eating giants and the carnivorous predators that hunted them. In the seas, marine reptiles like mosasaurs and plesiosaurids dominated the oceans, while the skies were ruled by flying reptiles such as pterosaurs. The first true birds, descendants of small theropod dinosaurs, began to emerge during this time, taking flight across the skies. Though they were small at first, They were part of a larger evolutionary trend that would eventually lead to the rise of birds as the only surviving dinosaurs. The Jurassic period was not just a time of giants, it was also a time when new life forms were emerging, ready to take flight, dominate the seas, and carve out new spaces in the ecosystems of the Earth. The Jurassic was also a time when the Earth's geography began to change significantly. The supercontinent Pangaea continued to break apart, and new oceans and seas began to form. The continents drifted apart, creating vast isolated ecosystems that allowed for the evolution of new species. These changes in the planet's geography played a crucial role in shaping the ecosystems of the Jurassic period. The oceans became more extensive, the climate became more stable and warm, and the land masses were filled with dense forests and rich vegetation. The lush, warm climate of the Jurassic period allowed for the flourishing of life. Plants, including the first flowering plants, began to evolve and diversify, feeding the massive herbivorous dinosaurs and supporting the intricate food webs of the time. The Jurassic world was vibrant and dynamic, full of life in the skies, on land, and in the oceans. The pulse of life had reached its peak in the Mesozoic era, and dinosaurs ruled the Earth with no challenge in sight. The Cretaceous period was the final chapter of the Mesozoic era, the final stage of the age of dinosaurs, and a time when life reached the peak of its diversity and complexity. The dinosaurs, having evolved into even more diverse and specialized forms, now roamed the Earth in astonishing numbers. Some grew to be the largest creatures ever to walk the planet, while others evolved into fast-moving predators, honing their hunting skills to perfection. The Cretaceous is marked by the rise of some of the most iconic dinosaurs, like Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, and Velociraptor. These creatures are etched into the popular imagination, representing the ultimate forms of dinosaur life. The Earth during the Cretaceous was a world of towering trees, sprawling forests, and warm, shallow seas. The continents were beginning to take their modern shapes, separated by wide oceans that were teeming with marine life. The Cretaceous seas were home to massive sharks, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs, while the skies were ruled by a variety of pterosaurs and the emerging birds. The evolution of flowering plants brought about another revolution in life, providing new food sources for herbivores and new opportunities for insects to evolve. Life on Earth was a constant cycle of growth, evolution, and competition. The herbivorous dinosaurs fed on the rich vegetation, while the carnivores hunted in packs, vying for control of the land. The ecosystems of the Cretaceous period were finely tuned, with each species playing a critical role in maintaining the balance of life. The pulse of life was strong, so strong in fact that it seemed as if the age of dinosaurs would never end. But the Cretaceous period also marked the end of an era. Around 66 million years ago, the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event occurred. It was an event so cataclysmic that it wiped out nearly 75% of life on Earth, including the dinosaurs. A massive asteroid struck the planet, causing wildfires, climate shifts, and a dramatic collapse of ecosystems. The dinosaurs, once the rulers of the Earth, were gone, leaving the world to be rebuilt by smaller creatures, mammals, and eventually humans. The pulse of life, however, did not fade. It simply evolved, as life always does, finding new paths and new opportunities in the ever-changing world. The world had changed forever. The skies, once filled with pterosaurs, were silent. The oceans, once teeming with marine reptiles, were now eerily still. The Earth's pulse, which had resonated with the thundering footsteps of dinosaurs for over 160 million years, suddenly slowed. The Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event had wiped out nearly 75% of all life on Earth, including the non-avian dinosaurs. This cataclysmic event, caused by an asteroid impact and the ensuing environmental upheaval, left the planet in a state of devastation. But as one era came to a close, another was beginning. From the ashes of destruction, a new world was born, one dominated by mammals. In the Paleogene period, which followed the extinction of the dinosaurs, the Earth began to rebuild. The first mammals, small and often nocturnal, had survived the extinction event. They were not the dominant life forms yet, but they were adaptable and resilient. Mammals began to occupy niches left empty by the disappearance of the dinosaurs, and over millions of years, they would diversify and evolve into the dominant animals on Earth. In the aftermath of the mass extinction, the climate was in flux. The planet had cooled significantly, and the world was no longer a tropical paradise for dinosaurs. This shift in climate, along with the rising oxygen levels, set the stage for mammals to flourish. As forests began to regrow and the landscape slowly healed, small mammals took advantage of the new world. These early mammals were small fur-covered creatures, some of which were insectivores, others herbivores. Their size and adaptability allowed them to thrive in the warmer climates of the Paleogene, where they began to diversify into new forms. One of the most significant evolutionary steps during the Paleogene was the appearance of the first primates. These early primates were tree-dwelling, agile creatures, able to move with ease through the canopies of the forests. Their grasping hands, forward-facing eyes, and excellent depth perception set them apart from other mammals. Primates, while still small and primitive, laid the foundation for the evolution of more complex species, including humans. The Paleogene period saw the beginning of mammalian diversification into many different forms, from early hoofed animals to the first cetaceans, whales, dolphins, and porpoises that would rule the oceans for millennia. On land, early horses began to emerge, with small multi-toed ancestors that grazed on the abundant plant life of the time. The continents, which had drifted apart during the Mesozoic, were beginning to take their modern shapes. The Americas, Europe, and Asia began to reconnect, allowing for the migration of species across continents. The spread of mammals and the growth of forests played a crucial role in this new world. The pulse of life was beginning to beat stronger once more, as ecosystems rebalanced and adapted to the changing conditions. The Earth's rebirth in the Paleogene was not a sudden transformation, but a slow, steady process. It was a time of exploration, of life seeking new paths, testing the boundaries of what was possible, and adapting to the shifting world. The mammals of the Paleogene were not yet the giants they would become, but they were evolving rapidly, preparing for a future where they would come to dominate Earth's ecosystems. The echoes of the dinosaurs may have faded, but the pulse of life was growing louder, more diverse, and more complex with every passing year. As the Neogene period dawned, the world of mammals was entering a new phase of evolution. The Earth, though still recovering from the cataclysmic extinction event, had begun to settle into a more familiar rhythm. The climate stabilized, and the planet began to warm again. The lush forests of the Paleogene gave way to new grasslands and open savannas. As the Earth's continents continued to drift and collide, new ecosystems emerged, and the evolution of mammals took an exciting turn. In the Neogene, mammals continued their rapid diversification, evolving into forms that would come to dominate Earth's ecosystems. The small, primitive mammals of the Paleogene were giving rise to larger, more specialized creatures. Carnivores, such as the early relatives of cats and dogs, began to roam the land, hunting in packs and establishing themselves as apex predators. These carnivorous mammals were equipped with sharp claws, powerful jaws, and highly developed senses, making them formidable hunters in the new open landscapes. At the same time, herbivorous mammals were evolving as well. The elephants, which had evolved from small early proboscideans, began to grow to massive sizes, their trunks adapting to help them feed on the tall grasses and trees of the savanna. Bovids, the ancestors of modern-day cattle, bison, and antelope, began to spread across the earth, forming the large grazing herds that would become iconic in later periods. The rise of these large herbivores marked a significant shift in the Earth's ecosystems, as grasslands and open plains began to dominate, replacing the dense forests of the Paleogene. The Neogene period also saw the evolution of primates into more recognizable forms. Early apes, with their complex social behaviors, began to evolve, paving the way for the great apes and eventually humans. These primates were highly adaptable and capable of living in a variety of environments, from the dense forests to the open savannas. The rise of primates during the Neogene laid the foundation for one of the most significant evolutionary events in Earth's history, the eventual emergence of humans. The seas, too, were transformed during the Neogene. The whales that had evolved in the Paleogene had grown into the majestic giants of the oceans. These marine mammals, with their streamlined bodies and sophisticated communication systems, had become the dominant animals in the oceans. Dolphins and porpoises, descendants of early whale ancestors, flourished in the warm seas, while the rise of sharks and other predatory marine life kept the oceans in balance. In the skies, birds continued to evolve, their wings now fully adapted to flight. The Neogene period saw the rise of large flightless birds, such as the moas and terror birds, which roamed the land in search of food. These birds, with their massive size and powerful legs, became important members of the ecosystems they inhabited, filling the ecological roles left vacant by the extinct dinosaurs. The Neogene period was a time of dynamic change, a time when mammals fully established themselves as the dominant creatures on Earth. The rise of large herbivores and carnivores, the evolution of primates, and the expansion of ecosystems across the globe marked a time when the pulse of life grew stronger than ever. Earth was no longer a world of giant reptiles and dinosaurs. It had become a world of mammals, each evolving and adapting to the changing landscape, creating new relationships and leaving their mark on the planet. The Quaternary period, the most recent chapter in Earth's long history, has seen the world change in ways both dramatic and subtle. It is the era in which we, humans, have emerged as the dominant species. But before the rise of humanity, the Quaternary was marked by one of the most extreme climatic shifts in Earth's history, the Ice Age. The Ice Age, a period of global cooling, brought about massive glaciations that covered large portions of the Earth in ice. At the peak of the glaciations, enormous sheets of ice stretched across North America, Europe and Asia, shaping the landscape and creating the features we recognize today: mountain ranges, valleys and vast plains. The cold, dry conditions of the Ice Age altered ecosystems dramatically, forcing mammals to adapt or face extinction. It was during the Ice Age that many of the megafauna, giant mammals that roamed the Earth, flourished. Creatures like the woolly mammoth, the saber-toothed tiger, and the giant ground sloth roamed the icy steppes, grazing on the grasses that dotted the frozen landscape. These giant creatures were perfectly adapted to the harsh, cold conditions, with thick fur, large bodies, and specialized behaviors that allowed them to survive in the challenging climate. As the Ice Age progressed, humans began to emerge as the apex species. Early Homo sapiens, with their ability to adapt to changing environments, began to spread across the globe, hunting large animals and developing tools to survive in the harsh conditions of the Ice Age. They created complex social structures, formed tribes and learned how to manipulate fire, which allowed them to stay warm in the cold, build shelter, and cook food. The rise of human culture, language, and technology marked the beginning of a new era, an era where humanity would shape the future of the Earth. The end of the Ice Age brought about dramatic changes in the environment. The glaciers began to melt, sea levels rose, and ecosystems shifted once more. The megafauna that had once ruled the Earth began to decline, likely due to a combination of climate change and human hunting pressure. As the Earth warmed, forests spread across the land, and grasslands were replaced with forests. The rise of human civilization marked the beginning of a new chapter in Earth's history, one where humanity's impact on the planet would be felt more and more. As the Earth slowly emerged from the harsh grip of the last Ice Age, around 12,000 years ago, the planet began to transform in ways that would shape its future for millennia. The vast ice sheets that had once blanketed much of the northern hemisphere, the icy giants that stretched from the poles to as far south as modern-day New York, began to retreat. This slow thawing was not an instantaneous change. It unfolded over thousands of years, a gradual warming that would mark the end of a dramatic epoch and the beginning of a new one. The retreating glaciers did not simply melt away. Their movement across the land had left behind a legacy, a world scarred by deep valleys, lakes, and rocky outcrops. The retreating ice uncovered landscapes that had been locked under layers of frozen earth for millions of years. What had been a desolate tundra began to show signs of life. The first vegetation, small hardy plants such as mosses, ferns, and low-growing shrubs, began to establish themselves in the newly exposed ground. These early plants were tough, adapted to the cold and harsh environment, but as the climate warmed, new, more complex plant species took root. In the northern hemisphere, forests of pine trees, birches, and willows started to spread across the land. These forests, once confined to warmer latitudes, now stretched across what had once been a frozen tundra. Alongside the trees came a rich undergrowth of grasses, ferns, and shrubs, creating an entirely new ecosystem. As the ice retreated, it left behind vast networks of lakes and rivers, which had once been buried under thick sheets of ice. These newly formed bodies of water provided important habitats for a growing number of species, supporting an intricate web of life. New rivers carved through the landscape, bringing with them nutrients and creating rich wetland ecosystems. Lakes, formed in the depressions left by the ice, became breeding grounds for fish and waterfowl, while the shores became home to mammals and insects. With the warming climate and the newly available land, ecosystems flourished. The world had entered a period of rebirth, and the pulse of life quickened. The changes in the landscape weren't limited to plant life alone. As vegetation spread across the land, herbivores began to return. Species like deer, bison, and wild horses began to roam the grasslands and forests, feeding on the new vegetation. These herbivores played a key role in shaping the newly forming ecosystems, their grazing creating open spaces that allowed grasses to thrive. The movement of these large animals also helped to spread seeds, further promoting plant growth. The Earth's landscapes, now warmer and filled with plant life, began to resemble a more familiar world, one that would eventually support the complex ecosystems we know today. At the same time, carnivores, such as wolves and cats, began to return as well. With the resurgence of herbivores, predators were drawn back into these newly formed ecosystems, where they hunted and maintained the balance of life. The Earth, now recovering from the ice's relentless grip, was a place of dynamic change, where species evolved to fill new ecological niches. Life had not just survived the Ice Age, it was beginning to thrive in new and profound ways. As the Earth's climate warmed and the glaciers continued to retreat, the impact of the Ice Age on the planet's biodiversity became more evident. The extinction of the megafauna, large, iconic species that had roamed the Earth during the Ice Age, was one of the most notable effects of this transition. These animals, such as the woolly mammoth, mastodon, saber-toothed tiger, and giant ground sloth, were specially adapted to survive in the harsh, frigid conditions of the Pleistocene epoch. With the warming climate and the changing environment, these large mammals struggled to adapt. While some scientists argue that climate change alone may have been responsible for their extinction, it is also believed that early humans who had begun to spread across the globe played a significant role in hunting and competing for resources. The loss of these massive creatures had profound implications for the ecosystems of the post-Ice Age world. With the extinction of the megafauna, the plant and animal kingdoms had to adjust. Smaller mammals, such as foxes, hares, and rodents, began to thrive in the absence of their larger competitors. These creatures, which had once been secondary to the megafauna, now found themselves occupying important ecological roles. Carnivores, like wolves and bears, grew in number as they adapted to hunting the smaller, more agile herbivores. Interestingly, the warming climate and the retreat of glaciers also gave rise to new types of plants. Deciduous forests began to spread, replacing the cold, harsh tundra with a more temperate environment. These forests, filled with oak, pine and maple trees, created new habitats for wildlife, supporting a diverse range of species. As plants spread, so too did the herbivores that depended on them. Over time, these changes created the world we recognize today: forests, grasslands, and wetlands teeming with life. Despite the many challenges posed by the changing environment, the Earth saw an explosion of evolutionary activity. As species adapted to new climates, they developed a variety of physical traits and behavioral strategies. Adaptation to the changing environments was the key to survival in the post-Ice Age world. The Earth was in the process of rebalancing itself. The megafauna may have disappeared, but new species better suited to the warmer, more dynamic ecosystems were emerging. This period of rapid adaptation would pave the way for the rise of modern species, including humans, who would eventually reshape the planet in ways the Ice Age survivors could never have imagined. In the wake of the megafauna's extinction, early humans adapted to the new environment. The warming climate created an abundance of plant life and animal species that early humans could hunt, gather, and domesticate. These changes provided the foundation for the next great leap in human evolution, the development of agriculture. But the Earth, still recovering from the Ice Age's devastation, had plenty of challenges ahead. The effects of the Ice Age would continue to echo throughout the Holocene epoch as humans and other species adapted to a changing world. As the Ice Age came to a close, the Earth's ecosystems began to stabilize, setting the stage for the rise of the modern world. The Holocene epoch marked a new era, one where life had slowly recovered from the extreme conditions of the Ice Age. Climate stability was key during this time. The planet's temperatures remained moderate, allowing life to flourish and ecosystems to reach new levels of complexity. The mammals that survived the Ice Age were joined by newly evolving species that were better adapted to the warmer, more temperate climate. In the far north, the regions once covered by ice began to undergo dramatic changes. The mammoth steppe, with its cold, tolerant grasses and hardy animals, was replaced by dense forests of birch, spruce, and pine. These forests created new habitats for animals like moose, elk, and wolves. As the climate warmed, bison and wild horses spread across the plains, finding new grazing grounds in the expansive, fertile landscapes. In the southern regions, tropical forests began to spread, supporting a rich diversity of plant and animal life. Rainforests flourished, providing shelter for a variety of mammals, birds, and insects. The Earth was no longer a frozen wasteland. It was a vibrant, diverse world, teeming with life. Rivers and lakes, which had been frozen just thousands of years earlier, now teemed with fish and supported flourishing aquatic ecosystems. The slow and steady recovery from the Ice Age allowed life to evolve in ways that had never been possible before. New species adapted to the more stable, temperate conditions. Humans, who had lived alongside the megafauna, adapted to the changing world as well. As the glaciers retreated and the Earth warmed, humans began to experiment with farming, domesticating plants and animals, and eventually creating permanent settlements. The Ice Age had shaped the landscape in ways that humans could not have predicted. It carved valleys, created rivers, and shaped the climate in ways that would influence life for millions of years. The rise of forests, grasslands, and diverse ecosystems in the post-Ice Age world created opportunities for evolution, adaptation, and survival. And though the Ice Age had ended, its legacy lived on in the Earth's landscapes and ecosystems, shaping the world that humans would one day inherit. Our journey through the vast expanse of time began at the very birth of our planet. The formation of Earth set the stage for the incredible transformations to come. From the first molten surfaces to the cooling of our planet, the process of Earth's formation was a slow, deliberate process that allowed the ingredients for life to begin forming. Over billions of years, Earth transitioned from a hostile, chaotic world to one that could support life. Life that would begin as simple single-celled organisms, gradually evolving into the complex beings we know today. Through the Precambrian, Earth's surface cooled and stabilized. The first simple life forms, like cyanobacteria, began to thrive in the oceans, releasing oxygen into the atmosphere. This created the conditions necessary for more complex organisms to develop. The Cambrian explosion marked a dramatic leap in the complexity of life, an explosion of diversity in the oceans that introduced new body plans, new species, and the foundation for the ecosystems that would soon spread across the Earth. The pulse of life, once slow and limited, began to quicken. As life continued to evolve, the Devonian period ushered in the age of fish, where the first vertebrates took shape. Fish diversified, their bodies evolving into specialized forms, and the oceans teemed with the complexity of life. This period also saw the emergence of amphibians, as the first vertebrates made the critical transition from water to land. The Earth was beginning to evolve in ways that would forever change the course of history. The Mesozoic era, also known as the Age of Reptiles, was dominated by the rise of dinosaurs. During the Triassic, the first true dinosaurs began to emerge, evolving into the massive and diverse creatures that would dominate the planet throughout the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. These dinosaurs shaped the Earth's ecosystems in unimaginable ways, creating new food webs and interactions. But even as dinosaurs thrived, the Earth was in constant flux. The continents drifted apart, climate conditions shifted, and the landscape was reshaped. As the Cretaceous period came to an end, the Earth faced a cataclysmic event, the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event, which wiped out the dinosaurs. The world seemed to fall silent, but from the ashes of this great extinction, the Earth began to recover. Mammals, small and modest in their beginnings, began to rise, filling the ecological niches left by the dinosaurs. The Paleogene period saw the first true mammals evolve, while the Neogene period brought the rise of primates and early hominids, setting the stage for the eventual emergence of humans. The Ice Age came next, as the Earth plunged into a period of cooling. Massive glaciers spread across the northern continents, and the Earth's ecosystems shifted dramatically. The great megafauna, creatures like the woolly mammoth and saber-toothed tiger, roamed the Earth, while early humans adapted to the cold and harsh conditions. The end of the Ice Age marked the beginning of a warmer climate, and the return of forests, grasslands, and diverse ecosystems. Through it all, life on Earth was constantly adapting, evolving, and shaping itself to meet the challenges of an ever-changing environment. Each era, from the primordial days of molten rock to the towering forests and grasslands of the present, has been a story of resilience and transformation. The Holocene epoch followed, bringing with it a warmer, more stable climate. Life flourished in new ways as forests expanded, animal populations grew, and early humans began to experiment with agriculture and permanent settlements. As our journey comes to a gentle close, whether you're still awake or drifting into dreams, I want to thank you for travelling with me tonight. The universe is vast, full of wonder, and at times full of silence. But here, in this quiet corner of the internet, we take our time to listen, to reflect, to drift. If tonight's voyage brought you peace or helped you discover something new, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what part of the journey stayed with you the most. If you'd like to join me again on future voyages through time, the stars, oceans, or atoms, you can subscribe. Until next time, dream slowly, sleep deeply, and remember, every star you see has played a part in the unfolding story of life. From the formation of the first atoms to the rise of complex creatures, the history of Earth lives within you. Every step of life's journey, across oceans, through time, and into the stars, is written in the very fabric of your being. I hope you enjoyed tonight's Midnight Voyage. Until we meet again, good night.